Conference championship games are being hotly debated. And one of the big reasons that a lot of people have a problem in the new playoff system with the conference championship games and want to get rid of them is the disadvantage that comes from losing a conference championship game. When you win, it puts you in the top four and gets you a bye. So a huge reward if you win. But if you lose a conference championship game, you take an extra game's worth of risk, an extra game's worth of pounding and injury. It's one less week of rest before the first round of the playoff. And you run the risk of dropping down from seeds 5 to 8, which would be a home game, to an away game, seeds 9 to 12, or potentially even dropping all the way out of the playoff, but that'd rarely happen. So it's a very high risk reward proposition to play in a conference championship game. Now, this week, Rich Clark, the executive director of the College Football Playoff Committee, addressed concerns that coaches had about this. The committee is, if adjustments have to be made, the management committee is open to that. But I put my faith into the selection committee to be able to work through the potential issues. The selection committee is sophisticated enough to know that that's a phenomenon they're going to have to deal with. That's a judgment they're going to have. They're smart enough for us to trust them and look at it in the right light. He pointed out last year that Georgia entered the SEC championship ranked number 1, and they only fell to number 6, meaning they did not lose their home playoff position. There are some other similar examples to Georgia last year of a team losing in a conference championship and remaining in that home playoff position. In 2018 and in 2019, Georgia, 11-1 both times, went to the conference championship, lost, and fell both times from number 4 to number 5. In 2020, Florida entered the SEC championship game number 7, lost, and remained at number 7. In 2021, Georgia was number 1, lost, fell to number 3, though in the new system, they would have fallen to number 5. Still would have had a home game. And boy, they lose a lot of SEC championship games down in Georgia. In 2019, Wisconsin went into the conference championship game at number 8, lost to Ohio State, and remained at number 8. And last year, Oregon went into the Pac-12 conference championship game at number 5, lost to Washington, dropped to number 8. So they remained with the home playoff position. But there are some examples in recent history where this would not have been the case. In 2022, USC entered the Pac-12 championship game at 11-1. They were number 4 in the country. They lost the game and fell to number 10. So they fell all the way down to away position for the playoffs. They fell behind 3 teams, Ohio State, Alabama, and Tennessee, who were idle that week. So they enter the championship game, ranked ahead of these guys, play an extra game than them, game that they didn't have to play, and then drop behind them, lose their home playoff game, and enter the first round one more week beat up than everybody else with 1 week's less rest. Alabama, Ohio State, and Tennessee in that scenario all remained with their home playoff game. In that year, USC even dropped behind Kansas State, and Kansas State played in the Big 12 championship game and lost that. In 2021, Oklahoma State was 11-1. They were number 5 in the country. They lost the Big 12 championship game to 11-2 Baylor, and they fell to number 9 in the country, losing their home playoff game. They dropped behind Notre Dame and Ohio State, neither of whom played in a conference championship. Both Notre Dame and Ohio State got a home playoff game in this scenario. Oklahoma State did not, because they played an extra game and lost in their conference championship game. In 2020, Iowa State was number 6 in the country. They had a home playoff game locked up. They went and played in the Big 12 conference championship game, and they lost the game to Oklahoma, a good Oklahoma team. They fell to number 10. They dropped below Florida, who had also lost their conference championship game, and they fell below Georgia, who did not play in their conference championship game. So Iowa State loses and drops and loses their home playoff game. They're traveling on the road, 1 week's less rest, 1 week more beat up. And finally, in 2019, Utah was 11-1. They were sitting in position number 5, entering the conference championship weekend. Position number 5, a great spot to be in. You're going to be matched against the position number 12, which most of the time is going to be the group of 5 team. most of the time. Maybe I think we saw one on the list here where UCF actually made it into number 12. Even then, you're still matching up with the group of 5 team. Anyway, Utah gets into the Pac-12 championship game. They go and play Oregon. They lose 37-15. Oregon was number 6 at the time, and Utah drops from number 5 to number 11. Florida and Penn State were both idle that week. Utah falls below them. So we have several instances in the last just 4 years where a team goes and plays in that conference championship game and comes out in worse position than had they not played in that thing at all. Meanwhile, teams that are idle move up in the rankings in some cases. In some cases, we've got teams going to play in these conference championship games that now it is true that in some cases you've got teams that go into these conference championship games and you may feel have been a little untested throughout the season. And then you go see them play in the conference championship game and you see them play against a good team. Maybe they haven't played a team that good all year. And now you think you know a little bit more about them. What do you do in this situation? Do you reevaluate this team on this now extra data point you have on them that you don't have on those idle teams? Let's say, for instance, you think you saw Florida play 5 good teams. You only saw Utah play 1 good team. They went and got waxed by a good Oregon team. And now you don't think they're as good as that Florida team. But can you take that 13th game that they played and hold it against them and drop them down? And this is the big conundrum that we're in here. What do we do in this scenario? Some people just want to wipe conference championship games out. Now that conferences have grown to 16 and 18 teams, if you wipe the conference championship game out, how do you determine the champion of the conference? There is probably going to be, like almost every single year, a couple of teams that are tied at the top in record. Are we just going to be okay with deciding who wins a conference championship game based on tiebreakers every year? Because that's what it would be. That's an incredibly unsatisfying thing to a lot of folks. It's probably going to be down to like the second or third tiebreaker. And I just can't imagine them giving up the money of the conference championship games and going about it like that. That's just not going to work. But what do you do for the teams that have to play this extra game and lose? I don't know, man. I don't know, but it's going to be interesting to see what happens in year 1. Because if one of those situations that I just pointed out there goes bad for one of those teams and they drop below a team that was idle and it's a team with a big mouth, I mean, it's going to be a big deal, a serious big deal, because it's just something that, like, us as Ohio State fans, we don't really have to worry about. You can see that twice in that scenario, we were a team that they dropped below us, having lost in a conference championship game. It's not something that is ever going to affect us. But, the Utahs of the world and schools like that, it's tough, man. It's a tough break. But USC, they got screwed with it once, which is funny. But I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see how this shakes out, and yet another reason to be excited for this season.